Hi there, I'm so happy that you came to do Fun with Foil and learn how to make some different kinds of sculptures using something that you have in your kitchen. I have 3 different kinds of aluminum foil. I have the big long roll of heavy duty, thicker paper. I have the very thin sheets, and then I've got a roll of just regular aluminum foil. This actually is recycled. And when you open it up and you pull your sheets out, just make sure that your fingers stay away from the sharp edges. And you're going to need a couple of different sheets of aluminum foil today. And in the beginning, you might have a few pieces that don't really work the way that you want it to, because as you can see, some of my initial attempts were not the way that they were supposed to be, because I figured out that if you squeeze the foil too much, it gets very crumbly and it starts to tear. But if you're more gentle with the foil, you can make some very cool stuff. Sometimes you can just look at a piece of foil and make what you've planned, and other times you have to change it because it might not come out the way you first thought. The first thing I want to show you how to do is to make a fish. And this little fish is just made from one piece of foil, just a square. And all I did was look at the foil and think about where the tail and the head would mostly be and just kind of crinkle it. And there's really no one way to do it. So I'm going to crinkle on this side for the tail and squeeze in a little bit over here for the head. And right now it's really, really loose, but it's starting to look a little bit like a fish shape. And it's going to get smaller because the more you crunch it, the smaller it gets. And this one doesn't have any fins, it's just very simple. And if you want it to be thicker, you can just fold it under and squish it in a little bit and smush your tail a little bit. And you can decide if you want to have it be pointy or rounded. And once you get the shape that you're happy with, then you can just squeeze it a little bit more. And if you squeeze it a little more, it starts to get a little bit thicker and a little more stiff, not as flexible. And then you are able to make the fish come alive a little bit more. If you have some permanent markers, they'll work really well on the foil. And if you just kind of brush the point of the marker against the foil, it makes it look like little scales. And you can make it be a realistic looking fish or a pretend fish. You might even want to see if it'll float or not. So you can do some experimenting. You might also want to make a boat and try putting in different heavy pennies or nickels or dimes or other toys that you have and see how much weight it'll hold until it goes underwater. And you also can attempt to make a person. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. Sometimes it's fun to make a figure out of the foil, and to make a little person, it's pretty easy. You need a rectangle of foil, a little longer than your square from before. And I drew on this, but you don't have to, because the most important thing on here are these 3 lines. There's 2 lines at the top that go about 1/3 of the way down, and 1 line at the bottom that goes about halfway. And that represents where we're going to cut. And one spot in the middle will be the head, the arms will be on either side, and the legs, of course, at the bottom. So you take your scissor and you can just snip on that line. And scissors can get sharper when you cut aluminum foil. This one's actually working now. And if you want, you can draw the line, or you can just eyeball it, whichever's easier. And then what you're going to do is, once you have all the cuts, is do some scrunching. And I find it's easiest just to scrunch the middle first. And that's going to be the body, the torso of your person. I just ripped that a little bit, but it's pretty forgiving. We'll be okay. So where I ripped it, I'm just going to scrunch that leg a little bit, very gently, and kind of tuck under the raw edges so it won't be so sharp. It's starting to look a little bit like this person. I'm going to turn it around and work on the arms. And because your arms aren't as long as your legs, you might want to fold over part of the foil and just make the arm a little bit shorter. And you can also save a little extra for a hand. And again, I'm not squishing it too much. It's still pretty loose, because if I make a mistake, I can kind of pull it apart and fix it. The head is a little bit trickier because you want to kind of roll under some of that extra foil to kind of round it out. And if you really want to, you can take some little scraps of foil and stuff it in and make it a little bit stronger. And I'm thinking that my little foil guy is starting to come together, so I'm going to squish the legs a little bit more. And you can twist it a little bit, you can just squeeze it, just kind of feel it. And the first time you do it, it might feel kind of weird. And then when you make a couple of them, it starts to become a little bit easier to know when to squish and when to stop. And the little feet at the bottom can just bend under or bend up. And you might even be able to get them to stand up. You can tie a string on them, make them into a puppet. You can make them a building. If you want to make some clothes or something to add on to him, you can take a small piece of foil and fold it over, and fold it over again. And you can wrap this around and add something extra to him to make him look fancier. And you can make him a friend, have a dance party, and you can even decorate with your permanent markers again and add a face and add maybe hair or clothes. And you can also use other materials besides foil. So if you want to take a picture of any of the little people that you make, I'd love to see them. Just send them to the Mandel JCC. Thanks. I hope that you have your foil all ready and a scissors and some markers, because we're going to make an animal this time. Maybe one of your little people need a pet. So take a rectangle of foil, and the bigger the foil, the bigger your sculpture will be. And I drew some hints about what lines you're going to need. And you can see there's a head and a tail, 2 back legs, and 2 front legs. And when you cut about a third of the way down, twice on the top and the bottom, you have 3 sections on the top and 3 sections on the bottom. And that's going to help you create your creature. And it could be a realistic or a fantasy animal. It's up to you. And when you have this paper all flat, you want to get it a little bit more scrunched. So what you want to do is kind of give it a little scrunch where the back legs and the front legs are. Not too tight so it doesn't get too crumbly. And just loosely do those legs. And that's going to help you see where the body's going to be. So I'm just going to fold this in half so that my legs can be under my animal's body. And I'm going to just scrunch the middle a little bit more. Now the front leg might need to be squeezed a little tighter so you can see where it is. And the same with the back. And a lot of animals have tails, So what's different from this one than the person that we made last time is that there's a extra piece in the back. So you can crumple that up and you can mold it so that it goes up and curls or goes down, however you want it to look. And then you can decide if the legs are going to be the length that they are, or if you want to make them a little bit shorter. You want to make paws or hooves at the bottom, depending on what kind of animal you're making. And then the head can kind of get scrunched, and if you go very slowly, you can maybe even pull out a couple of ears on the top. And decide how much more you want to tighten up the foil pieces, and it'll get a little smaller, but it'll get a little stronger. You might also want to take a marker before you start scrunching and do some different kinds of colors and lines so that your animal gets patterns, or you can do the patterns afterwards and add things on afterwards. So you can add fur or spots or stripes. This one I started working with thinking, well, maybe I could make a tiger, but I didn't think it was going to be exactly like a tiger or a cheetah. So I just kind of did some camouflage. And when you start to scrunch it, you can save some of the color on the top. And that adds a little bit more interest to the legs. And when you're making your animals, if you want them to stand up, sometimes it helps to bend the bottom a little bit, and then you can determine how much of the foil you're keeping and how much you don't need, so you can bend under. And then you can move him or her, and you can even do some stop action by taking a picture, moving them, taking another picture, and putting them in a little slideshow. You have your own little movie. So have fun making those animals. Have a great rest of the day. Bye now.